Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from AnthonysCustoms, and for this review, we are looking at the new Marvel Legends Spider-Man figure. This is the one with the web wings, also known as Web Wings Spider-Man. And it's a really good figure that has a couple of fairly serious issues, but ultimately it's pretty cool. So, I mean, there's a fair bit to talk about. I know we've already seen a Spider-Man that looks like this from the 3-pack for Civil War. I think, now I don't have mine to compare it to, but I think there's a lot of new stuff on here. It might just be that it's painted so differently it looks different. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at my old review. So I'll link that. There's a link to that review right there. All right, so let's go ahead and get this guy off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands just about 6 inches, almost exactly 6 inches tall, which goes to show that these are not to scale, but I don't care. He'll be relatively in scale with the rest of the figures, so that's all right. Just a little over 15 centimeters. I don't think Tom Holland is 6 feet tall. If I'm wrong about that, then I guess okay. Anyway, this guy does look pretty cool, so I'm pretty happy about it. But before we get into the figure let's talk about accessories. The first accessories to talk about are the web wings, because that's what makes this guy unique for the most part, and they suck. They're terrible. His web wings are only good in this pose because they're only that size, and they do connect to the arms, but just barely. Both of mine won't stay in no matter what if I touch them. They fall right out. Well, now this one's not gonna, of course. I wedged it in extra hard. That's what she said. So I mean, they're not great. You can see the tabs on them are just really tiny. They're really tiny tabs, and then they don't have any like keying, so they just kind of wedge in and hope they don't fall out. But they're only that big, so they can't be used with his arms spread out, which is when he would have them out. So it's like, why? Why can't they do things that make sense? Shouldn't the web wings be big enough so that he can actually open his arms in a useful way? Whatever. So we have those. We can kind of just ignore those if we want to. We do have interchangeable hands. We have 2 fist hands and 2 web slinging hands, so that's pretty cool. And then we have interchangeable heads. We have one head with his eyes open and then one with them kind of closed, kind of like an action-y pose. Eyes. That's the eyes I would make if I was going to be in an action-y pose anyway. So I mean, I think that's cool that we got the alternate head this time also. So we're going to set these things aside. We don't need the accessories out. Let's talk about the actual figure. Things of note. The paint job on this guy is fantastic, almost. They painted the web lines with a gray wash, which means there's gray paint everywhere on the figure. But it's mostly in the web lines and then in the recesses and things. So it works kind of like shading, which is good, but there are places that look too gray, like the hands, for instance. They're very gray outside of the web lines. And then for the feet, I've just got big splotches of gray here, and there's one on top of the foot. So, I mean, it's not necessarily ideal. You can see on the arms, there's a lot of pooling of gray there as well. If you can ignore those spots, then it does give kind of like a cool look that it's shaded, but then you don't really see that in some places, and it's not great. It definitely could have been done better. But they did a really good job painting the black spots on there, so that's really cool. And then on the blue, I don't know if you guys can see this yet. On the blue, now you can see it for sure, they have these kind of like suit lines or seams or whatever you want to call them all throughout the blue for the torso, for the legs, and it looks fantastic, and it makes the figure look really, really good. And then for the eyes, they're painted really nicely. The eyes are painted very, very cleanly, so that's great. And then the last thing worth mentioning is the sculpt. His entire suit is textured. I mean, it's barely noticeable because it's relatively to scale, so it's hyper tiny texture, but it is there. And it gives this guy kind of like a flat look. Combine the paint with the sculpt, and it just looks like a really high quality figure. I mean, as high quality as we're going to get from a Marvel Legends, so I'm very happy about that. As far as the articulation goes, the head can look up really well, it can look down really well, and it can rotate, and it can lean a little bit because it sits a little bit high. I think it's probably okay. I think what it really is his shoulders, kind of the way it's sculpted, they go down rather than having the shoulder, so it makes the head look too high, but I think it's all right. And we do have a butterfly joint, which works pretty well. It's a little stiff and doesn't really afford that much range, but it does work and doesn't look terrible, so I'll give it to him. We have our ball hinge, which does work really nice for the shoulders. Full rotation, full hinge. Bicep swivel is just fine. Double jointed elbow works really well. And then we have a chunk of red paint that goes flying. And then we have the wrist swivel and hinge, so that's fine. The hinge is a little stiff, or it just can't, I guess it just can't go any farther. So you're going to have to play with the wrist if you want it to If you want it to hinge, you're going to have to kind of tuck it in to do that, but that's no big deal. For the ab crunch, we can go back one notch. They did not continue the black through that part, but it kind of doesn't show because of the gap in the plastic, so I guess that's okay. They did paint the gray in there, so that's good. Going forward, we get 2 notches forward, so that's pretty cool. And it's not sculpted. I mean, it's got the texture, but it's kind of like flat and looks chiseled, so it looks a little weird. For the waist twist, it works just fine. For the hips, all the way forward, no problem at all. Going out to the side, definitely limited. Going backwards, not so much. Thigh swivel works just fine, and you can also rotate the leg around on the ball peg at the actual hip really well, so that's good. Double jointed knees work all the way, no problem there. Ankle hinge goes pretty far forward. I like that. Goes all the way back, so that's good. And then we have our ankle rocker, which is fairly squared up, so I guess that's okay. Both of my feet have a lot of gray pooling on the bottom. I don't think that's intentional, but it might be. In which case, it's really sloppy. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about this figure. They did a mostly really good job, and then there are just a few issues here and there, so I'm going to go ahead and say I recommend it. I like it more than I dislike it, and I can probably live with the issues. So there you go, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have new videos up every single day. We talk about action figures, movies, TV shows, video games, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you come back for that. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and in the meantime, keep collecting.